Hello, friend. Welcome to this week's episode of the Remarkable People Podcast with Pollyanna Darling. Today, we're talking about how Pollyanna went from bedridden to buff and how she became a stand-up paddleboard champion in her 50s after years of issues and injuries and hardships that you're going to hear, from childhood trauma all the way to physical ailments and injuries that doctors diagnose and prognose that she'd be in bed for life. So she's going to talk about incremental small changes every day in our life, never giving up, and having the vision and achieving it that God has for you. So I'm David Pasqualone. Check out this episode of the Remarkable People Podcast with Pollyanna Darling now.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life. The Remarkable People Podcast.
Hey, Pollyanna, how are you today?
I'm really good. Thank you, David.
It is an honor to have you here. And I just told our listeners a little bit about what to expect in this episode. But right from the source, we have listeners who have been with us for 6 years and 300 plus episodes. And we have listeners that this may be their first interview they've ever listened to. If they stick with you, Pollyanna, what do you guarantee, at least one thing they're going to be able to take away, apply to their life, and be a better human?
That they will understand that you can have a diagnosis, but you never have to accept a prognosis.
That is super powerful. And if someone has been sick, they absolutely understand what that means. But for people who haven't been sick, hopefully you won't, but statistically, either you or someone you love will be. Pollyanna, quickly, what's the difference between a diagnosis and a prognosis?
So a diagnosis, you have something wrong with you, you go to the doctor, they give you a diagnosis of what's wrong with you. So maybe you've hurt your back, or maybe you've got cancer, or whatever it is. And a prognosis is what a medical professional tells you about your future. So they might say, well, what I was told was your condition is only going to get worse and you're just going to have to manage it. That's a prognosis. It's a prediction of what your future will be like, and it's a nonsense, fundamentally.
100%. Today, my back has been hurting for like 3 weeks, and I would listen to conventional wisdom of the doctors, and they say, don't do this, don't do that, don't work out, blah, 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 blah. Today, I went to the gym, did everything opposite the average physician would say not to do. I did it, and I feel better than I have in 3 weeks. So that's kind of what you're talking about, but at a more serious level, as the listener is going to hear.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are only limited to our beliefs and what God wants. So we're going to talk to Pollyanna after the short commercial, and you're going to hear specifically what she dealt with, what she overcame, and hopefully we'll hear the practical steps of how she did it so you can too. We'll be right back.
You're still looking good.
I'm still feeling good. You know, I've got all your MyPillow products. Mattress topper, bed sheets, MyPillows, towels, slippers, blankets.
I'm interrupting this commercial to do something I've never done before. Get 2 MyPillows absolutely free on orders of $100 or more. I can't do this forever, so get on board with this great sale today. Our best-selling 6-piece bath towel sets or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Our famous standard MyPillow is only $14.98. Queens, $18.98. King size, only $1 more. Body pillows, $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bed sheet sets. Any size, any color. So go to MyPillow.com or call that number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And when you spend $100 or more, get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, Pollyanna, where are you from? What's your origin like? We don't want to dwell in the past, but everything that happens to us, good, bad, ugly, pretty, or pretty ugly, it makes us who we are, right? So we want you to kind of give us your background. You can go as deep or as shallow as you want, and then bring us up to your diagnosis, prognosis.
So I was born in the UK. I had a pretty difficult childhood that left me with ongoing CPTSD, so childhood, it's got complex PTSD from childhood trauma. And I spent most of my early life plotting my escape from England. Always thought I didn't, never wanted to be there. So I started working at 12, and by 16, I went to the US on my own and hung out with friends and did a lot of travel. And eventually I came to Australia in 1994. And I was somebody who was never, ever going to get married or have children or have a mortgage. and and never say never is a really good phrase, because it's usually exactly the thing that happens. So was at a point in my life where I suddenly had all three of those things. I had three young boys and a marriage that wasn't going very well, and just a life that, I don't know, I felt like I wasn't fully living. And I remember going outside into the garden one day and just kind of shouting at the sky, there has to be more than this. There has to be more. And I fast forward a bit to my second marriage, and I had this experience in 2009 of almost dying. And I had a ectopic pregnancy that ruptured, and I was only saved by the hospital, but I had a near-death experience in that hospital, actually. And it changed me fundamentally, because I stopped being afraid of death at all. And I also had a lot of very strange experiences after that. And then I had another nearly dying episode. I went to Peru in 2015, right before my marriage completely broke down. And I was in Cusco at altitude, and I had a bleed on the brain. And that was another extraordinary episode of, I guess I'll tell you a little bit about it because it's interesting. So I was in this room. We'd landed in Cusco. I didn't feel right from almost the moment we got there. I got into this state where I couldn't really speak. I could hear what people were saying, and I could hear my own thoughts, and I could think what I wanted to say, but I couldn't say it. It wouldn't come out, or it came out really slurred, or it was the wrong words. I couldn't move properly. And for some reason, nobody took me to hospital, which is probably just as well, because the hospital was at altitude. And I started dropping in and out of consciousness. And I was lying there with this oxy shot thing, which is like a mask that you put over your face. And I heard this voice. I heard a voice, like a Morgan Freeman God voice, say, "Go down." and, and so I'm lying on this bed, and I thought, am I going mad? Am I going crazy? And then I heard it again. It said, "Go down." And if anybody was telling me this story, I wouldn't believe them, because I'm not, like, I'm a pretty skeptical person. But I heard it, and I managed to explain to the people I was with that I needed to go down. And so the guy who ran the Airbnb was this wonderful French Canadian guy, and he said, I will go and I will see what I can do for you. And he came back and he said, "I have spoken to my friend in the valley who is a prince among men, and you can stay with him. And I've spoken to my other friend who is the ex-chief of the anti-corruption police in Cusco, and he will drive you down the mountain, and I trust him with my life." So they put me on the back of a porter and shuffled me into this car, and I was in the back of the car. It was a really, really old car with vinyl seats, and this amazing man drove us down the mountain at 90 miles an hour, which was insane. And because the seats were vinyl and I was lying in the back, every time we went around a corner, I'd like whoosh across one way and then whoosh the other way. And partway down, everything went translucent. So it was as if everything was a tracing, and I could see through the people in the car in the front, and I could see through the car and everything. And
And at this point, I don't interrupt you, but you didn't know what was going on. Nobody knew what was happening. They just knew you were sick.
well, my sister-in-law is a midwife, and so she was like madly Googling my symptoms. and, and she said, "Oh, you've got all the symptoms of oxygen starvation that babies get when they're born, starved of oxygen." Anyway, so we knew I wasn't all right. Anyway, so I'm lying in the back of the car, and everything had gone translucent, and all I could see was this geometric grid of tiny filaments of light, tiny, tiny filaments of light. They looked like little matchsticks, and they were all joined together in this crazy grid. And so I was lying in the back of the car going, everything's filaments of light. And it lasted for about 10 minutes, and I can still see it in my mind. I can still see it. So we went down to the Sacred Valley and to this wonderful man's house, and he was married to one of the daughter of one of Peru's greatest artists. And so everything in this house was incredibly beautiful, and there was art everywhere, and it had a walled garden, and through the walled garden ran this little creek and beautiful trees and flowers, and he was so arty that he would go out every morning and he'd cut flowers into bundles in his own garden and then arrange them in these stone urns in the garden. So he was making, anyway, it was beautiful. And I was there with his 3 dogs, and I was sitting, and they never left my side. One of them was called Kalpa in Quechua, which means force. So I had the force with me, which was funny.
Nice.
A great big dog, like a mastiff. And I was sitting in the garden, and there were hummingbirds all around my head, making these wonderful sound that they make. And I looked up over the walled garden, and the Andes were there. And I spent the whole time asking myself, why is this happening? Why have I nearly died again? What is this about? And as I was looking at the mountains, I suddenly felt this rush through my whole body of you've half-assed your life up to this point. And I would never use that language now, because now I know that it was trauma that stopped me from taking opportunities and from being kind of not really engaged with being alive. But that was the language I had then. And I made a promise in that moment to stop doing that. And also I made a promise to the planet that I would devote whatever was left of my life to seeing it thrive. So I came home. It took me a couple of years to recover. I had these weird episodes every 6 weeks to 2 months where I'd start dropping things and my language would go a bit funny and I'd be exhausted. But
And was it diagnosed at that point oxygen deprivation, like brain damage, or how did they classify it?
It's high altitude cerebral edema. Apparently it's a rupture in the blood-brain barrier. So I had a MRI or a CAT scan, I can't remember which, when I got back, and it seemed like it was all right by then. But I spent 3 weeks in Peru with this terrible pain in my head, like this terrible, terrible, very specific pain, and just wiped out. From what I've read, it seems like it's similar to having a stroke, but slightly different because it's caused by altitude. And most of the people who get it are climbers who climb at altitude. And it's not like altitude sickness, because with altitude sickness, you have a headache and you feel sick and you're vomiting and those kind of things. It doesn't really have any symptoms except you just start going unconscious. Eventually you go into a coma, and then 60% of people who get it die because they don't know what's going on. Anyway, I recovered, and then my marriage broke down and I was very sad. And I decided randomly that I've skipped a bit here. Actually, let me rewind a bit. In 2017, I hurt my back really badly. And that was on top of a whiplash injury that I had not attended to from 2012 in a car crash. And I herniated a disc, and it set off a whole cascade of spinal symptoms that related to this unresolved whiplash injury and other back injuries that I had, and I ended up in bed for pretty much 6 months, like just bedridden. I was in agony a lot of the time, and I went to various doctors, and I did all the things. I did acupuncture and Bowen therapy and energy healing. I did all the things you can do. And one of the things that helped me was something called Ortho Bionomy, which is a really gentle form of treatment that gives the nervous system the information it needs to create change in the body. So there's no forcing or manipulating like chiropractic or osteo, those things. Anyway, I spent 6 months in bed crocheting face washers and listening to podcasts. And eventually it's very slowly got better with the help of the orthobionomy guy. But at the point where I was lying in bed, I thought, I'm never going to do anything I love again. I had a big dog that I couldn't walk for, and I had to give her up. I'm a very keen gardener, and I could barely go out in the garden, let alone do any gardening. So it was pretty dark kind of time. It's an interesting thing to be confined to bed. It makes your world get very small because your world becomes your room and, whoever chooses to come and see you in your room. So fast forward a bit past that marriage ended in 2020 in the middle of COVID. And I still wasn't okay, but I had a whim to join a stand-up paddleboard club. And I don't know why, but I went and they lent me a board, they lent me a paddle, and they were very encouraging. And I started to paddle once a week. And when I first started, I was in so much pain afterwards. My shoulders would come up here, my neck would be out, and I'd have these terrible headaches, and they'd go for 3 or 4 days. And I just kept going, but listening to my body and doing it very slowly. And over time, the number of days that I would be in terrible pain reduced. And so I decided that when the number of days in pain reduced to 3, I would start training twice a week, which I did. And long story short, I started racing and I won my first race. And then I did a lot of training, which I had to really manage in a different way from everybody else because of the pain in my back. But I became the over 50s women's stand-up paddleboard champion in 2023 in Australia.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Much to my enormous surprise. And I mean, it was surprising in so many ways. One, because how is this even possible? How is it possible to go in 5 years from bedridden to winning a championship? How is it possible? Nobody told me that as an older woman, that a woman over 50 could become stronger and fitter than ever before. Women are often written off, once you get over a certain age, it's like all downhill from there. Well, this is certainly not true. So I wrote a book about that journey. It's called Bedridden to Buff. And part of writing the book, so I wrote the whole thing, and then I read it back and it was boring. It was really boring. I thought, this is rubbish. So I threw it away. And I sat for a long time with what I really wanted to say. And what came up was that my child self, the child that had experienced a lot of situations that were not okay, wanted a voice. She wanted a voice. And so I ended up writing this book where I was giving some of the chapters to my child self. And it was as if she came through me and spoke. So even when I read back, it's like a child has written some of the chapters in the present tense, in her experience. So it was really difficult to write that book because it was very confronting it was while I was writing, it was like the child was right there in the experiences she had. So that was very confronting and difficult, but also incredible as a healing process, like really incredible. And then when I recorded the audiobook, she came through in my voice. So there are people have told me it sounds like a child is speaking in some of the chapters. So that whole process was extraordinary as a way of self-healing. But the whole thing, the process of healing from the back injury and becoming an athlete at 51 or however old I was, that was incredibly healing. And then the process of writing about that story and bringing the child through was incredibly healing. And it was all directed by my inner wisdom. So it wasn't anybody else saying, you need to do it this way, you need to do it that way, you need to try this. It was all coming through me. So you might have some questions.
Yeah, I do. I want to make sure I clarify first. You had the neck injury. I want to make sure what was the timeline. You had the neck injury from the car accident, the whiplash, then you hurt your back, then you had the stroke. What was the timeline that got you to
What
the
was the
point of
timeline?
bedridden?
Okay, so I nearly died in 2009 from the ectopic pregnancy. In 2015, I went to Peru and had the bleed on the brain. In 2017, so in 2012, sorry. In 2012, I had a car accident where I hit a stationary vehicle at 80 because my baby was crying in the back and all the traffic suddenly stopped and I hit this vehicle and I had terrible whiplash. But because I think because of the CPTSD, I didn't go and get any help. I just rang my husband, he came pick me up and he took me home and I went to bed. I didn't seek any help. It was so strange. When I think about it now, I think it's such a strange thing that I didn't go to a doctor, I didn't go get looked at, I didn't get an X-ray. And I eventually, after 6 weeks, I almost couldn't move. Like I was just, ugh. And I went and got some treatment from I can't remember what it was, craniosacral treatment or something that helped me get moving again, but it never came right. And when my back was injured in 2017, they x-rayed my whole spine and they said that two of my neck vertebrae are fused and there was calcification in my neck and all these problems from the whiplash. And so I haven't actually looked at it as a timeline before, so this is an interesting exercise. Yeah, so I hurt my back in 2017 and then became an athlete at 51 and won this gold medals in 2023.
And how long was it between when you became bedridden to when you started paddleboarding? Like,
I
how
was
long were you
bedridden
bedridden for?
about 6 months. I couldn't really do anything. I spent most of my time in bed. I've got 4 boys. I've raised 4 boys. 3 of them are men now. One of them's still only 15. But I talked to him recently about that period, and he said, I just thought that mums were in bed. I just thought he was only 5. He thought I was in bed most of the time. He thought that's what mothers did. They just lay in their beds. So I was about 6 months bedridden, and then I I started paddling towards the end of 2020.
So there's people now listening, and whether it's them or someone they know and love, they're getting a prognosis, right, from the doctors saying, oh, you're just going to be hurting for life. Take these drugs. In your life, when you look back, if you were to give step 1, step 2, step 3, try this. This worked for me. It may not work for you, but this is what I did. What was the steps that you took to get out of bed and onto that paddleboard?
So I I never give up. I'm one of those people that you can push over and I just get back up again. And in that circumstance, I couldn't. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, I went to see all kinds of doctors. I went to an orthopedic surgeon. He looked at my x-rays and he said, this condition is just going to get worse. You are going to have to manage it. but it's going to get worse, and you have this and you have that and you have calcification and you have, all these things. And I left his office that day and I felt so defeated, that I would not be able to do the things that I love to do. And I remember walking down the street and just feeling this heaviness descend on me of, well, what is my life going to be now if I'm just going to be managing this thing that, this person has said, this is what your life will be. And he was top of his field. So he was in his 70s and, he's a well-renowned orthopedic surgeon. So I felt miserable for a while. And when I was bedridden, I felt miserable. And I think it's legitimate to feel miserable because it's the grief of a change in your life, right? So anytime you get a diagnosis that's difficult, there's a grief for the life that you feel is gone now because something's changed. So I spent some time grieving, but I feel like, number one, my spirit is kind of irrepressible. It doesn't stay squashed for very long. And number two, I always feel supported. So somewhere along the way, and I can't say exactly when, I started trusting my life. So I realized that looking back at my life, even though I'd had this very difficult childhood and I wasn't necessarily supported by my parents in the way that would have been lovely, I had always been supported by life. So life had risen up to support me at all these different times with the right information or the right help or the right resource or whatever was needed. It was always there. So I tried different therapists, and one of the things that I think really matters if someone is unwell and seeking help is that you trust your own body and your own instinct around who helps you. So I went to see various different people some healers and therapists are very invested in being the person that heals you. And I don't like that at all. I don't like how that feels, that a person's identity is bound up in fixing me. So I had different experiences with therapists where I just wasn't comfortable in my body with them. And because of the way I was raised, I thought, oh, it's not okay to stop seeing this person because, I don't know, it's like you enter into an agreement with a therapist around, a physical therapist around what that course of treatment they're going to take. And it seems like they know what they're doing and they know what they're saying. And in a way, they've got all the power. But I learned through that when it didn't feel right for me, when people weren't listening to me about how sensitive my system is and about when things were hurting. Because sometimes people would say things like, oh, I know you say you're sensitive, but I've worked with people like you before and, it'll be fine. And then I'd be in terrible pain for weeks because they'd done something and not listened to me. So that's one of the steps is it's really important to listen to your own body and your own intuition about who you let heal you, in inverted commas. I don't know that anyone else can ever heal you. I think in the end, you heal yourself. But to listen to that, to listen to when it doesn't feel right, and to know that it's okay to say, I don't want to come and see you anymore. To say, no, this isn't working for me. I'm going to seek help elsewhere because it's your body and it's your life and you are the one that has to live in it. So that's part one. And then I found something that worked for me, and it worked for me because it was gentle. So Ortho Bionomy is very gentle. And there's no forcing, there's no pushing. It just works with your body's natural wisdom to give the nervous system the information it needs to go, oh, something's not right. Let me adjust. And it adjusts itself. So that really worked for me. But the place where I had to overcome that prognosis the strongest was when I was training. because I started paddling and it hurt so much to paddle. Just it hurt my neck, it hurt my shoulders, it hurt my back. It was horrible. But I loved it because I was out on the water, I was outside. And and it was during COVID when I started, so it was pretty tricky to be outside anyway, but I loved it because I was outside in the open with the water, there's all these beautiful stingrays that are in the river where I paddle and sea eagles. And when you're on a paddleboard, you don't have an engine, so you're not disturbing any of the natural environment. You can paddle right up to pelicans and it's really lovely. So, but the thing that was difficult was not going into catastrophizing over what happened every time I paddled. So I'd get off the board, I'd go to bed. The next day I'd wake up and I'd be like, ugh, and my head would be pounding and, everything was wrong. And it's easy from that place. It's really easy to do, to go, oh no, I can't do this thing because it hurts and I'm in pain. And for me, once I get into pain, my body just goes into this cascade of sort of panic and freezing up and all of that. So working with that tendency to catastrophize, especially if you've come from any kind of background of trauma, is really a thing. Like it's a trick to do that, to manage that in a way that is kind to the parts of yourself that are freaking out. So I had to do things my way. And I think that really matters actually on any kind of healing journey, is that you are listening to yourself and doing it your way. So I remember there was a day once when we were training and the guy that was leading the session, I felt that I'd got to a point where I needed to stop. I could feel it in my body. I need to stop now because if I don't, I'm going to push it too far and I'm going to pay too big afterwards. So I stopped training and he went, oh, you can do more, Pollyanna. Get back on the water. Get back on the water. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm not going to get back on the water. And he was sort of unpleasant to me about that. But I felt proud of myself because I'd run with what was true in my own body and protected the integrity of myself.
Yeah, it reminds me when I was in high school, right when I graduated, they found a tumor in my head. After years, the doctors telling me nothing was wrong. And I had Dr. William Montgomery, who was the head of Mass Eye and Ear at that time. He was also like the top guy at Harvard Medical School. And after they removed the tumor, it grew back. And then it grew back again after they removed it a second time. Either after it grew back the first time or after it grew back the second time, he told me, because what happened was I went back to the hospital and said, hey, I know this isn't supposed to happen. I know you guys took it out, but I'm feeling the same way again. And the doctor, just not Dr. Montgomery, he was literally in the Middle East, like working on a sheik or a sultan or some huge political figure. And the person that took care of me in his place was an established physician. And he belittled me and mocked me and said, it's just residual, my mind's so used to having it that I don't know how to be healthy. Again, tell me I'm making it up.
Yeah.
So long story short, when I got back, they took an MRI. When he got back, they took an MRI. They confirmed the tumor grew back. And he said to me, we might have PhDs. He's like, but nobody has a better PhD than you on your body. He's like, don't listen to anybody, not even me. He's like, if you know something's wrong or something's not working for you, it's like, tell them all to where the sun, put it where the sun don't shine. He's like, you need to listen to yourself. Now, he was from the old school. He did my surgery in his 70s, and he was from the old school where medicine was to help people and it was still a practice. It wasn't a profession and I know everything, but yet he was the best in the world. So what you're saying lines up with common sense, it lines up with scripture, and it lines up to the reality I know. So thank you for sharing that.
And what you've just shared with me reminds me that when I think we have another sense, and it's a sense of the body understanding that it's dying. And nurses that I know say they call that an impending doom. The sense of impending doom, because apparently patients report it. But when I had the ectopic in 2009, I I had this feeling that I was dying, and I was. And then I think the only reason I'm here after the bleed on the brain is because I started having that same feeling again. And I recognized it from when I had the ectopic. I recognized this feeling in my body of it's kind of like all your cells go, uh-oh. And so I told my sister-in-law, I managed to tell her I feel like I did when I had the ectopic pregnancy. And that's when people started taking it seriously that something wasn't right. And I knew in my body that something wasn't right.
Yeah, and you got to take that into account. And there's always balance because some people get out of control and they panic and they start making stuff up in their brain. But when you're of a sound mind and you're not in a urgent situation, especially if you've trusted Christ as your savior. Once you trust Christ as your savior, the Holy Ghost indwells in you, and the Bible says you have an unction from the Holy One, and you know all things. So if God's leading you a certain direction, He's the only one that really matters, right? It's like He put that in you. That is your opinion, and that's what you should be listening to, not a doctor, because they're going to go back and drive their BMW and play golf on the weekend, whether you live or die. They don't care, most of them.
I think some of them probably do care. But I
In
think,
my experience, I've seen a lot of doctors over the years, and I
yeah.
would say 2 out of 10 care and are qualified, 6 out of 10 just float, and 2 out of 10 should be beat like pinatas and have their license removed. That's
I
my
think what's
experience.
really, I think what's really interesting about, what we're talking about right now is that your intuition is a very quiet voice. So, you were mentioning about, people getting all in a panic and getting up in their heads. If the voice that you're hearing is very loud, it's most likely your mind and not your intuition and not the deep inner calm voice. So when I was having the ectopic pregnancy, I was actually doing an interview. I was in the middle of an interview with somebody on the phone, a journalist, because I'd published my first book and I was promoting it. So I'm on the phone with this guy and I had this terrible pain suddenly. And I managed to get to the end of the interview and I went and lay down on my couch and I thought, I'm just going to drop in and see if I can feel what's going on. And I heard a very quiet voice, and it somehow showed me in my mind's eye that something was torn. And I didn't even know what an ectopic pregnancy was at that point in my life. I had no idea. And but it was quiet. The information was quiet.
The
Just like
Bible
when,
talks about God's voice as a still small voice.
yeah, it's a quiet voice. It's not a big panic stations. Like, oh my God, you better do something, Pollyanna, or you're going to die. And I think it really matters to listen to that quiet, calm voice. And if you've got a voice shouting at you, it's probably something that needs tending and care rather than being listened to.
Yeah, I agree. So now let's talk about pushing through the pain because there's the old saying, things get worse before they get better. And that goes along in almost everything. But you can overdo it. Like you said, that guy was trying to push you
Yeah.
and you knew your limit that, okay, this is the point where if I go any further, it goes from pushing and stretching myself to injuring myself and setting things back. For our listeners who, whether they're grossly overweight due to illness or, people can get in a car accident, break their neck, and they get it to 500 pounds. Their first steps hurt. So whether they broke their neck in a car or hurt their neck in a car accident, whether they had something happen, maybe they're just depressed, it always hurts to start moving again. It always hurts to start exercising again. But for you to change your life and not only go from, like your book says, bedridden to buff. But just to get out there, there's a million steps before you won your championship. What kind of advice do you have for our listeners, that consistency each day to keep yourself in the right mindset and find the balance?
For me, it was experimenting. So I didn't say, all right, I'm going to just get out there. I'm just going to do it. And like that whole, like, you got to do it, that thing. That's not the world I play in. I decided that I would just take myself out of my comfort zone a little. So I went once a week to paddle. When I began, I couldn't even finish a session. But I'm just going to go a little bit further than I think I can, just a little, and see what happens. And my Ortho Bionomy guy, who was amazingly helpful, he said to me, just see if you can build your resilience. And so that's what I started working on, is building resilience. So if it's somebody who, if you're somebody at home and you very not mobile, it would be thinking about what could I do that would just be a little bit more than I usually do. So if you normally walk down to the mailbox or something once a day, then maybe you go a little halfway down the street or walked past the mailbox and out onto the road. It's like, how can you move just a little bit further than what you usually do? And it can be tiny, but your body starts to understand that we're going to be doing a little bit more. And wherever you start moving, your body will make that part of you stronger. And it's okay. It is okay for it to take as long as it takes. Because I think we have these crazy expectations in modern life that everybody should be winning all the time. And that, and that everyone can do everything. And if you're not succeeding, you're sort of failing at life or something. There's all these ideas that are propagated by social media and advertising and everything else to try and make you feel incredibly inadequate and need to buy their stuff so you feel better. And it's all just rubbish, because you don't have to do it that way. You can do it gently, and you can do it kindly, and you can do it in a way that means that you're just incrementally improving. And for me, it was very frustrating to be incrementally improving, because I always like to have everything I want happen right now. So it was a bit of a struggle to deal with my mind. I remember paddling really early in the morning. We used to go at 5:30 on a winter's morning, and it was stunningly beautiful. So the water would be really dark, and there'd be a little line of midnight blue along the horizon, and maybe a crescent moon, and then the touch of dawn coming. And everybody else was miles ahead of me. I could barely see them. They were miles ahead of me, and I thought, oh, I'm never going to be able to catch them up. But there were people in that club who really, really encouraged me. And I think that's something else that matters, is who you surround yourself with. Who are the people that you spend time with? Are they people who are saying, you can do it? I've got faith in you. I trust that you can do it. And now I'm going to support you to do it. However you want to do it. I'm here for that. Like, are those the people you have in your life? Or do you have people who are like reinforcing your unwellness or your whatever's wrong with you? Because there are people who like to be around to make themselves feel better, that you're not okay and they are. And so I think it really matters that you have people in your life who will encourage you and cheerlead you and not rush you or hurry you or put you down, or all of the ways that humans are. And that's really important too.
I agree. And I think no matter where we are in life, we need to be that person to someone else as well. I mean, we can't give what we don't have, but all of us can give a kind word or encouragement. And I know in my life, there was people I didn't even know at times, and they said this, what seemed to be the smallest thing to them, but it changed the course of my life. Like, I was going to quit, and it kept me moving forward. So God put them in my life, to give me just what I need at the right time to keep going. So I think you're spot on with being around life suckers versus life givers.
Yeah. And there's a way, I think, that I really think that that thing of what you focus on grows, whatever it is. What is that phrase? I know there's what you resist persists, which is an annoying phrase, but also turns out to be true. But there's another one about focus. Oh, attention. Never mind.
I know what you're saying. I can't remember either, but it basically says what you put
Energy
your.
flows where attention goes.
That's it. That's it.
So if you have someone in your life who does give that encouraging word, or who does offer support in a way that feels like it's helping you towards where you want yourself to be, then having gratitude for that person and really noticing, oh, here is somebody who is offering me the kind of encouragement that I need, and I have so much gratitude for that. You don't have to necessarily express it to them, but internally having that enables your mind to start looking for that elsewhere, because you've got your attention on, oh, here's the encouragement, here's the support. Whereas if you have your attention on, I'm not being encouraged, I'm not being supported, this is shit, then it's almost as though you will find more of that, because that's where your attention is. And so taking care of your mind really matters. And I also think that taking care of any unresolved trauma makes a really big difference too. So a lot of the pain that I had in my body was from this sense of unsafety in my own body, which was a result of my childhood experiences. And so I would continuously look for safety outside myself, which I did in both my marriages. I kind of pinned my safety to this other person. And so whatever they did made a difference to whether I felt safe or not. And it also made a real difference to how I experienced pain. So when I would have some kind of pain or problem, my whole system would freak out and panic because I didn't feel safe in my own body. So I did quite a lot of work myself on trying to get to a point where I could just go, yep, I feel safe in my own being. And a lot of that was nervous system work, like working on nervous system safety. And that work is out there. You can find it. ChatGPT can even tell you what to do. But that matters too. So there's a whole lot of different ways that you can attend to your well-being. And I think it can be overwhelming. Like even in this conversation, we've talked about a bunch of things. If you're not in a good place, it's easy to get overwhelmed by, well, you got to do this and you got to do that, and you need to attend to your mindset. And I think the thing to do is to ask yourself, what would feel good to me right now? What's the thing that I could do right now that would feel good to me? I don't need to think about all those other things that Pollyanna and David are talking about. What's the one thing that I could do, and start there? Like start small, because when you start small, you don't overwhelm your nervous system. You don't trigger past trauma. You don't push too hard. You're just going, all right, this is going to happen in increments. So that matters.
Yeah. And when she says that, ladies and gentlemen, you know what she intended. She means healthy things. One new healthy thing. That's not a shot of heroin or a shot of whiskey or going out and, doing something immoral. It's doing something healthy for yourself, that next step. And she knows that, and I know that, and you know that. Everybody knows it, but don't be a politician and twist it around. Well, Pollyanna said to do it. No, she didn't. Yeah. So yeah. Well, let's do this, Pollyanna. Where are you at today? Where are you heading next? If somebody wanted to reach out and connect with you, everything from checking out your website, buying your book, what's the best way to reach you?
My books are on Amazon, and I have a website, which is pollyannadarling.com. But I have just been through a horrendous burnout I've recovered now, but it was late last year. So I've reinvented myself, and my website is not quite finished. So I spent the last 15 years working in reforestation, and in a leadership role. And I've decided now, after this crazy burnout, that I'm actually much better. I can do more to support the planet by supporting the people who are working for the planet. So I'm offering coaching and support to people who are in leadership positions in businesses that are, social enterprises or working for the planet. And I also providing something called Birth Your Book, which is a kind of deep dive for people who want to write their story into what's motivating them, what the key elements are, who they're writing for, so that the beating heart of the story can really come out. So those are the two things that I'm doing at the moment. And you can go to my website. My homepage works, but the rest of it is a little bit of a schmozzle at the moment. So you'll have to forgive me for that.
Can they contact you through the website, or is there a social media outlet that's best to reach you?
Yeah, they can contact me through the website. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I have a Substack called True to Type with Pollyanna, which is writings of mine. I'm also running a spring writing challenge. If there's any writers watching, it's free to join. You just have to subscribe to my Substack, and that starts on the 22nd of September. It'll be 6 days of writing prompts, and there is a prize. So, and yeah, just I'm happy for anyone to reach out if they want to chat.
Yeah, continue the conversation. So before we wrap up this episode, thank you again for Pollyanna for being here today. And ladies and gentlemen, as always, you can check out the show notes, get links, learn more, reach out to Pollyanna if you have any questions or want to continue the conversation. But as for final thoughts, encouragement, inspiration, is there anything you want to leave our audience, Pollyanna, before we wrap things up today?
Yes, there is. There is one more thing, and that is to have a vision of where you want to be, and to remind yourself of that often. And I never had a vision that I wanted to win races or anything. That wasn't my aim ever. It just happened over time because I just kept thinking, well, I wonder if I could get a little bit faster, and I wonder if I could beat that person. I wonder if I could do this race. So there's a curiosity there. So there's a lot of people who say, you've got to have a vision and you've got to focus on who you want to be and blah, blah, blah. But I think you have a vision and you hold it gently, and then you just be curious. Can I walk to the end of the driveway? Can I enter that race? Can I write a page or two of my memoir? Can I, and there's a way in which curiosity will allow you to reach a little further than you ever thought was possible.
Yes, I know with God, all things are possible. And I know from firsthand experience that you've had, firsthand experience I've had, that doctors don't know everything. And we rely way too heavily on doctors. Like we talked about diagnosis and prognosis. They're just men, or men or women, mankind. And they're not always right. And the best thing, one of the best things in the world is just proving them wrong. And I've gone back to doctors and said, hey, this is what you told me, and this is the reality. How many other people have you told those lies to that you've ruined their lives? So don't be afraid to challenge a doctor just because they have a PhD. It means nothing in reality if it's not working and helping people. So, Pollyanna, thank you for being here today.
That's my pleasure. Thank you very much, David.
Yeah, it's been an honor. Ladies and gentlemen, reach out to Pollyanna, reach out to me if I can help you, and share this with your friends and family so we can not just grow the podcast, but so we can help more people. I'm David Pasqualone. This was Pollyanna Darling, and thank you for listening to the Remarkable People podcast. We'll see you in the next episode. Ciao.
The Remarkable People podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life. The Remarkable People podcast.